Hello. Hello, Alex. Hello, and welcome to the Omnia. I always find this ridiculous to do, but I'll do it anyway. Welcome to the Omnia Performance Podcast. With me today is my good friend and this time, coach, Alex Viada. Hi, Alex.
Hi, how you doing, Johnny?
Good.
That's a loaded question.
We just before we started, we've been discussing the fact that you know how I'm doing, so that's so we'll cover off some of that as we go. Before we do that, the usual stuff. I always say Fergus does this better, but I'm starting to believe there's not much to it. Frankly, is that if you are listening and enjoy, then subscribe, press all the buttons, give us a review. Gives a wave, all the I don't know, all the things that need to happen to make this happen. Please do them for us. We have all kinds of services that we offer. Just jump on Omnia Performance on the website and have a look through that. If this isn't the most crap beginning to a podcast ever, then you're
I like the authenticity, personally.
Yeah, me too.
I
could have read a script there, but it would have just been a script. How are you doing, mate? You asked me how I was doing. You know, I'm screaming at the walls. How are you doing?
I'm certainly not doing that. So, thinking about my relatively cushy weekend and, just relaxing, sitting back going, yeah, this guy's about to do some hard stuff. I'll, in between my Starbucks coffee, I'll be sitting here watching you on the tracker. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm doing well. No, but thanks for asking. Very well, thanks.
looking on from a distance at this is I can't do that at the moment. Obviously, I'm kind of so deeply entrenched in it in my head that I have no objective perspective anymore. So it's always interesting to hear what other people think of it. And I guess that's one thing that you and I have enjoyed throughout this process is I've enjoyed very much because it's been a while since I've been directly coached. I think the last coach I had before you was you, in actual fact, if I'm not wrong.
Half a decade prior to that, literally.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, it must have been. But yeah, it's been interesting as well because it gives me a kind of a viewpoint that I haven't had, not just managing the practical elements, as in here's the prescription, here's what I think you should lift based on X, Y, and Z, and here's how fast you should try to run, etc. It's mostly the fun I've had with it has been the sharing of information has been sometimes enlightening. You know, you can look at these kind of things within your own kind of myopic tunnel view and say, this is how I feel, this is how I'm doing. And I've been wrong. I've been quite wrong on a couple of occasions, and actually to a positive end in actual fact, which tells me something about character and something about my interaction with my own effort. I won't maybe come back to that, but it's been pretty interesting. What have you thought about it all? That's a question that I should have, and I should apologize for not asking, but looking in on what's going on and looking in on how the what the end goal has been, which for anybody who's only just tuned into this one episode, I'm moving 250 kilometers across the Arctic Circle in 5 days time. So yeah, has it been fun for you, or has it just been a dull walk? Like, for God's sake, just get on the treadmill.
No, for me, it's been fantastic, and I think what's made it so interesting is working with an individual with your background. It's these sort of ultra endurance events are always interesting because people talk about the reason that the reasons that they don't succeed. There's so much circumstance to it. There's such a mental aspect to it. There's so much that goes into it. If somebody isn't accustomed to doing these, they never know what's going to happen when they get out there and things get challenging, things get difficult. And so part of the training and for folks like that is very much continuously mentally testing them and forcing them to empty the well a little bit to see how they react, to see what kind of feedback, to see where they're not just where the weaknesses are, but what their positions of strength are that they fall back on when things get challenging, and helping people get through that process. With you, there's been much less need for that, I think, because a big part of your programming is you've always had the mental toughness, sometimes to your detriment, and the ability to continue on even when you're definitively on shattered limbs. So I think a large part of this has been very much just saying, okay, this is an individual who has all the prerequisites, even the physical, the mental prerequisites, and all that. The objective is just to get you in a situation where there's no weaknesses at this point. So it's allowed for a real variety of training, trying to shore up different sides of your performance, trying to make sure that, you don't have to worry about the big picture, because the big picture is so much of it, and we'll talk about, is preparation and, physical preparation and gear and strategy and all that. But the moment to moment, the moment to moment fitness, the moment to moment ability to make the right decisions and all that, being able to very much design the programming to benefit that. It's a real switch. I think it's made doing all this and working on all this with you and hearing your perspective as somebody who knows exactly what's about to come, because you've done extraordinarily challenging events before.
Mhm.
It's been honestly a big learning process for myself as well, especially seeing your interpretation of performance in certain areas versus what I'm seeing from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, that's been
That's been
fun.
fascinating.
Yeah, it has been. It has been. I think we'll come to that. I think probably what to do then is if we can build a picture out of how the programming has been built between us. I'll let you take the lead on that, being that you built the programming. But the ultimate goal, as we say, has been it's not just, is it? It's not just getting across this particular event. It's getting across. It's extrapolating out and considering that we've got 4 events. So these 4 extreme ultra marathons. So we've got a kind of a half an eye on the fact that we need to also be resilient enough physically, I suppose, is a reasonable way to put it, to recover afterwards in preparation, to be capable to prepare for the next one. And then there's also our hybrid lean on all this, in that we also don't want to come out of it shaped like a pencil and unable to lift a barbell. Well, any more than I already am. That I should probably. So we're trying to kind of lean into the strength work. Well, why don't I let you take the lead on that and kind of what the kind of main considerations? Because I think before I waffle on any further, it's been interesting, or it would be interesting for somebody to look on from outside, from maybe a more ultra based world, and have a look at what we're doing and why.
So maybe as a bit of an interesting bit of background, I remember when we first started talking about this project, you pointed out to a training program, a template that I had put together. Called the Peak Performance Template, and what was interesting,
the Batman
template, yeah. Well, because I got a question months and months and months ago, like, how would you do programming for Batman? And I started thinking, okay, what are the qualities in an individual like this that facilitate, because one of the things from a strength and conditioning background, when you're helping an athlete perform, or in this case, Batman, he has to do everything. What you want to do with a strength and conditioning program is, you can never injury proof somebody, but you want to try to mitigate any weaknesses that they have. You want to do training in such a way that it complements their primary sport, which can be extremely multifaceted, and do so in such a way that you're addressing potential weaknesses that simply engaging in their sport over and over again are going to create. So what I started looking at what are the things that cause injury in running. Here you have a big guy, he's going to be running all the time, he's running all night, he's doing acrobatics. I started looking at data on things like stress fractures and data on things like, even shin splints, plantar fasciitis. Yeah. What are the factors that seem to mitigate the chance of this sort of injury, which got me into a lot of what you'll see, the plyometric and agility side of the program. Yeah. Looking at a lot of things that had to do with chronic injury, chronic upper body injury in things like military and individuals who are carrying large packs over time. This is an individual who's going to be wearing armor. He's going to, so a lot of that then came into how I designed a lot of the medleys and a lot of the conditioning, and bringing in components from, when we used to train about for ultras and doing things like endless walking lunges. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it was pulling a lot of these disparate components that are all a combination of, injury reduction and improving agility, and doing different types of training in certain modalities that are meant to do things like improve your ability to recover between sets and improve your ability to maintain focus and mental acuity during challenging endurance events and challenging evenings, how to deal with sleep deprivation. Yeah, so a lot of that all came together into this program, which is what I think caught your eye. And basically what we've done is build on that. Yeah. And using that general framework of incorporating a combination of, there's certainly strength work in there. There's absolutely work that is all about balance and proprioception, maintaining basic barbell competencies and actually improving your strength early on. Doing a lot of work that involves how to maintain balance, directional changes, because even if this is an ultra event, there are still directional changes. And, not when you get fatigued, if you step on a rock, if you're fresh and you step on a rock and you roll your ankle, you immediately recover. If you're fatigued and you step on a rock and roll your ankle, you go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of that has been, let's work on agility, let's work on balance, let's work on unilateral work, not to just improve your muscular endurance, but to improve your coordination and balance and ability to recover from different challenges. So putting that all together into the programming, it's been very much, let's incorporate all of this on the strength and quote unquote functional fitness side of things, and then as well focus on obviously the aerobic component, and make sure that not only do you have the baseline aerobic adaptations needed to do this, but you also still have a lot of the high intensity adaptations that sometimes get lost, because those are very much what's responsible for helping you maintain things like mental acuity, ability to recover even after going up a short steep hill, when you're already carb depleted and suddenly you go extremely anaerobic over a short period of time, a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it's been this kind of multifaceted everything together, and really just being able to put it together based on your feedback and based on your data.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for me. Like you say, that initial peak performance Batman template did draw me in so fast. It was beautifully written and really an interesting concept, because you can do what we have done is say, okay, Johnny Payne, he might be very, very good looking, but he's not Batman. So what do we what do we do with this? To make it, to apply it. And actually, some of the application wasn't far off. Initially, it's become ours. This whole project, obviously, but some of the initial application was very similar to how that was. Or sorry, all the principles were there, weren't they? Because I was attending to jiu-jitsu, I was doing other things in that realm, if you like, and yeah, it's been interesting. But from a specificity purpose, what has been fun to see actually play out, and you and I haven't actually had this conversation, but the plyometric, the agility stuff, and the stuff that you probably associate more, or coaches perhaps and athletes would probably associate more with, I don't know, high force production sports like sprinting or fast moving, fast paced games like rugby or whatever, where excuse me, that change of direction has an obvious kind of application. Is I've seen that play out now a couple of times in the hills for real, and been able to kind of have that kind of moment of flashback to the training and said, well, this fucking works, because this role that you described it perfectly, actually, this kind of step on a small stone and it's like a marbles in a kid's room kind of moment where your feet go out, and the other one, which wasn't even planted at the time, is now got to do the job of saving your skin.
Yeah.
I did that on a decent clip down the hill the other day. Rolled out, foot went away. I had that microsecond, well, that's it, fucked moment.
As we've talked about the last week or so.
Exactly, yeah. And it landed in a really, and this is on my bad leg as well, landed in a really quite impressive pistol that I then sprung right back out of. But the balance and the agility were sharp. I felt sharp, and I've no doubt that 6 months ago, had I not been doing that particular style of training as a key part in our program, I think that would have been a bad moment, a real bad moment.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that's only my personal experience and an anecdote, I suppose, but it seems to play out. But I think I'd be right in saying, and I'm sure you'd agree, that people wouldn't expect to see that in a program that's, I suppose, ultimately the end goal, or the key, one of the key goals is ultra marathon, but it's very applicable.
Yeah, and I think it's so often neglected, and I think there's often this pursuit of just saying, if I'm going to be spending training time, I got to be putting more miles on my feet, and just doing the long runs and everything else. And there's absolutely a role for that, but and you've been there. What's been the wrench that gets thrown into pretty much every unsuccessful endeavor you see an ultra runner do? It's usually they injure something goes wrong.
Yeah.
It's very rarely, and look, if you were trying to train for a flat, fast, best 100-miler you could ever do, then it might be a little bit different. We're saying, okay, that's less of a concern. But what we're trying to do here is, yes, it's an ultra, but more than anything else, it's a constant test of acuity, of durability. I mean, because endurance isn't just the physical ability to perform a task, to generate power. It's not being able to move at X speed over X amount of time. It's not just that. It's the ability to be both physically and mentally able to address every challenge that's going to arise along the way.
Yeah,
And it's really easy to forget that because I think a lot of times people will be spending time going, well, why am I going to program myself plyometrics when I've got 60 minutes today? I should just go out for an easy run or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
That's going to be more applicable, and it's easy to lose sight of that.
No, I think it is, mate. I think it is, and again, that comes back to one of those great moments for me as a coach, to be on the flip side of that now, as being coached, as being your athlete in this regard, because I dare say that although when I've got my coaching hat on, I can see these things quite well. As an athlete, putting it together for myself,
Yeah,
I know I'd have said, "Well, I'll shave." It's a little bit like packing the bag at the moment. It's like, what can I leave out of
yeah,
this pack that's
yeah,
probably not going to kill me to not have it? But then you're likely sometimes best to take that extra kilo and just to stretch that analogy and make sure that you've got everything you need. And it's definitely
yeah,
panned out well.
yeah,
Something else you mentioned earlier on, which I've been enjoying, because frankly, because it feels fun to do. But I've also been enjoying the benefits of, is we've done quite a lot of sprint work, haven't we? Actually,
mhm, yeah,
really pushing the top end speed, and I guess really speed is a proxy for something else that we're doing. In actual fact, we don't need to make me fast so much as push me into a certain place, from an
yeah,
energy systems perspective. But
yeah,
talk us through that, Alex, because that's been fun to do because it just feels like good balls out, balls to the wall work. But
yeah.
we've had some nice moments with that kind of stuff as well, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah, we have, and again, that's something else I think gets left out very often is that the higher intensity work starts to go by the wayside, and there's a lot of things from the high intensity work that you're talking about because I still believe if you look at the top ultra runners, these are not slow individuals, and I think especially for a lot of people who are saying, okay, I'm building up to this challenge, the first thing that they compromise on, they sacrifice, is the speed work. But the short time domain adaptations that we're talking about, a lot of the local cellular adaptations, again, certain parts of the mitochondrial profiles and enzymes and everything else, very much associated still, even on very long distances, with recovery, even between short bouts.
Yeah,
Even if you're doing a very, very aerobic sort of activity, you go up one sharp climb and you're already tapping into those systems. And it's the kind of thing where there's still a trickle down effect. You're still, if you're doing 1 to 2 to 3 minute intervals, a lot of those adaptations on a cellular level are still benefiting you on the longer duration work.
mm,
You're still improving your ability to utilize oxygen at a cellular level. You're still improving a lot of that local capillary density and all that. You're still becoming more efficient at slower speeds by doing some of the higher intensity work. And not only that, but you're still doing things like improving leg turnover, which on downhills can be extremely important. You're doing things like improving your body's ability to brace at speed, which
yeah,
again is you're not going to be sprinting, but there might be a couple sections where you're moving downhill, you're moving quickly. You never know what it's going to throw at you. So, of course, not doing anything where you're moving quickly is going to be to your detriment. But yeah, the biggest thing is building aerobic fitness, building cardiovascular fitness, and building local muscular fitness as well. Like I said, on a cellular level, that's not just low and slow. That's not going to get you there completely. If that's all you do, you definitively start to hurt your ability to do things like burn glucose for fuel. And what's going to happen is at various points during this event, you are going to be in those higher threshold areas. It's just going to happen. And I think a lot of people underestimate how high intensity even a short, relatively brisk climb is when they're wearing full kit.
yeah,
And this
yeah.
is this is not strictly aerobic. Yeah,
No, it really is. I mean, if we provide example there, the local training that I've been doing, I think at the weekend I covered off. Well, I don't know. You haven't actually seen this data because my Garmin buggered off. But I think the gradient, the elevation gain over the total day was something like 1,600 meters or something. So that's a decent amount of gain over the course of a 6 hour bout. And I know that day one, and that was tough. So on some of the peaks, some of the gradients were hard, and some of the pushing was hard. And I know that I was right up, top end, 190
yeah,
beats per minute easily,
yeah,
which is close to my max. But I also know that when I hit that peak and turned over at the top, I could have a quick high five with my imaginary peak buddy, and then
yeah,
I didn't have to lie down at the top and go, "Oh my god, I need to take
yeah,
a quarter of an hour here to get my breath back," because
yeah,
my heart rate came back down to a manageable 145, 155 for me
Yeah.
is pretty aerobic, and start moving down the hill at a good clip. So
Yeah.
immediately just that recovery from that particular, but that's one climb, and I did many
Yeah.
of them. It's not just once. You can't get away with it. And I think had we not done that kind of work, I know that I might have managed. Let's say we just thought, okay, this is a low intensity trudge that we're aiming for. This is just point A to point B and the grit to keep going. If I hit a hill or hit an obstacle, I'm done for, really.
Yeah.
Same conversation came about, not directly with you, but about the fueling. In actual fact, is are we fueling for what kind of fuel do we need? Do we need lots of long range kind of fat fueling, or do we need carbohydrates? And you just have to look at the bloody map and know that day one on this thing, the terrain's pretty tough. There's two peaks. I think there's over I might be thereabouts 1,000 meters of elevation in snowshoes, as we've been discussing off air. If that doesn't get your heart rate up, then either you're not really moving and just daydreaming about it, or there's something very, very strange going on. So yeah. And another part of the speed work, which I've found very interesting from a personal perspective, is that is the awareness of self, the awareness of your body. If you're running fast and you're running a really good clip, and one thing I find a treadmill pretty useful for, in actual fact, because you kind of have to react a little bit to the treadmill, not in the way people bang on about, but certainly you have to be aware. If you fall, you're going to do that kind of comedy YouTube spin off the back of it, aren't you? So you have to be pretty sharp. And I think becoming super hyper aware of how your body is moving at speed and allowing that kind of control of gait and all the rest of it feeds back into moving slowly, quote unquote slowly, so well that it's something that's clearly overlooked in a lot of programming. But that's been the one question, I think, because I've posted up now and again. I'm terrible with Instagram, but posting up now and again with stories, and you can see me doing a bit of sprint work, or I've said 10 repeats doing what I'm just describing what we've been doing, and then immediately get the question, I thought you were doing an ultra marathon, why are you doing sprint work? And so there you go, there's the answer. I haven't answered those questions directly because I'm too bloody grouchy to do it, but here if anybody's stayed with me, then here's the answer now.
Well, because I was going to say, because the last thing as well that you'll see is a lot of times when people do a lot of extremely long distance work, their gait starts to also worsen as well. They stop picking up their feet. They start adopting the whole ultra shuffle. And again, a lot of that speed work, you maintain things like that proper triple extension on the run. And when people start to get sloppy with their gait, with their turnover, like you said, they forget how to move quickly. And anytime you're going to pick up your feet, you're going to have to be picking up your feet. Yeah. You see people who do nothing but the low and slow work, and they'll stumble over pebbles. Yeah, it's really interesting. So it's everything, like you said. It's from the physical need, the proprioception, the biochemistry, everything. So it's sometimes, again, it's sometimes a difficult sell to people who are thinking, okay, mentally, I should just be doing this. I should just be doing this. I should be going out and doing endless, long, slow hours. What am I going to need this for? But as you pointed out, the first time you get to a climb and you've got however many kilos of kit on and you're going uphill, you're not going to stay absolutely aerobic unless you are taking one step every 5 or 6 seconds. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I can tell you from experience, it doesn't happen. Yeah. As much as you might want to do. We still go through that kind of, I feel great on the first 8 to 10 steps of that particular climb. I can probably charge up this at,
I'll make up some time right now.
And then you suddenly realize how human you are. Oh, I'm not the Batman we described. No,
this isn't that challenging. I don't know. This is a very generous cutoff. I'm going to beat this by 4 hours.
Dear, if only me. So one other thing, we'll jump about a little bit here, but it's just because it sits nicely with what we've just been discussing. Or to throw back a little bit, in actual fact, is that recovery time between those bouts gives us a good indication, doesn't it, of the overall kind of, I was going to say power, but it'd be conflating words, but the overall capacity, let's say, of my aerobic system. And one thing that we enjoyed a couple of weeks back was my lack of what would you call that? Well, let me describe it so we can kind of build a picture. Is that we did some heavy sprint work. I think there was a weighted vest or a loaded pack involved, and I came away and we talked that night, and you're asking me how the session had gone, because I've been recording the data. For anybody who's been following along, I've been recording the data and then not looking at it, deliberately not looking at it during or after. Sometimes if you've given me markers that I need to pick up on, then I'll monitor that during the session. But for the most part, I've been kind of following on with RPE, haven't I? And hit this at RPE 8, move up to 9, see if you can hold it for X amount of time, etc., etc. And then you've got however much time you've given me to recover before the next bout, as an example. And I think I came away from this and you asked me how I'd done, and I thought it was bloody awful. It was a terrible session. And I think retrospectively, probably leaning into the parts that did feel horrible and not recognizing what was good. But there's a great opportunity to experience again the power of having a coach, or even just having somebody who's willing to kind of enter into these discussions with you and listen, because I was kind of wrong. My interpretation was wrong, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, that's happened a couple times, because the entire thing about being in an experience is it's all going to feel terrible. Intervals never feel easier. Running never feels easier. It's you just go faster.
Yeah,
and it's never going to feel fantastic. And the nice thing about being able to sit where I'm sitting is, and maybe you see it more readily when you're doing a lifting workout, and you see that, okay, I didn't, the weight I wanted to move didn't move, but the session felt good. It's sometimes harder to look at a lot of objective metrics in a lot of this conditioning work, especially when you're not looking directly at the data. And I can do things like look at your heart rate recovery in between intervals and see that your heart rate recovery has improved dramatically, and see that after a hard interval, which may feel objectively terrible, your system is absolutely recovering, and your heart rate is coming back down. It's not spiking up to what it was. You're recovering very well. Your pace is staying up, and in many cases, I've noticed a couple times is, when you do a lot of these workouts week to week to week, I'm looking at a given time domain, looking at the overall level of stress with it, and then looking at it again, how quickly you're recovering in between each one. And it's it's the kind of thing that improves across the board.
Yeah.
And each and every one, you may say that's that session felt absolutely awful, but I show that interval, rather than it taking 48, 49 seconds for you to kind of return back to your kind of easy zone 2 or whatever else, now it's only taking you 39, 38, 37, 36 seconds. Yeah. And seeing metrics like that and being able to look at it, it's your own perception is very much a liar with this kind of training. And it's just, all of us are like that by virtue of the fact that we're in it, we're existing in it. Yeah. And we think we know the objectives. And in some cases with a lot of this training, it's difficult because the paces are being adjusted on the back end that you may not necessarily see, because they only adjust by a second or two per mile over a week. And you just know that last time I did this workout, you're expecting it to feel easier this week, and in fact, it felt harder. Well, that's because objectively it is harder. You just perhaps not necessarily aware of that slight small tweak, and little things like that. So being able to sit where I'm sitting and seeing your paces improve, seeing your heart rate recovery improve, seeing a lot of these fundamentals slowly improving over time, and being able to plot them on an actual graph and looking at your overall rate of progression I have the benefit of being able to do that.
Yeah,
sitting where I'm sitting. And I think I'm trying to recall what the metrics are that we were discussing that one time in particular.
It was as simple as I think I did the workout again just last week, because I sent you a very excited message, didn't I? Do you remember just saying that? Yeah. Because now I was looking at it from a different perspective. It was as simple as, this isn't it. I can't remember the actual workout off the top of my head, but it was as simple as there was some hard pace quarter miles. Something like a 5.5 minute miles, and I think you told me off because I was going too fast at one point, I think. The paces were set in order to elicit a response from me, and then slow back to a pace that we know is aerobic, and essentially you wanted my heart rate to come down to meet that pace back at that aerobic value again, and it was doing, and more so. And I think the first time I did it, I hadn't recognized it at all. As you say, I guess I was, for people who lift, maybe it's easier to think, well, I'm pushing the weight overhead or squatting it, let's say, and it felt like a grinder, and then I put the weight down, do another one, and it felt like a grinder. And I'm remembering what the grind was like. Whereas you're telling me, but you just did 8 lifts with 30 seconds. And it's kind of similar, isn't it? Is that I was able to do these things, and I was remembering that kind of, Jesus, that felt horrible. My heart felt like it was actually in my eyes somewhere, and You've done this before. I was about to say I was bleeding from my skin as I was running, but I remember you've actually done that lifting, haven't you? But the whole thing felt terrible, and I came away somewhat dismayed and was able, or disheartened is probably a better way to put it. And that night, able to say, "Yeah, it felt like shit," and you're like, "Well, actually, your recovery was the best it's ever been." And so the next workout, it was interesting. I still pushed because the numbers were there that I had to, or the target was there that I had to push for. But then I kept a kind of a half an eye on how do I feel between these times, and I was able to, before the end of the workout, send a quick message saying, "I can see it now. You know, my heart rate's down 140 something. It was within 17 seconds during one of the intervals, and it had been. I was like, how is this even possible?" And you're probably at the other end of the line going, "Yeah, I fucking know. I've been saying this for for X amount of weeks to you." But it's been a great process, because actually offsetting it like that to somebody else and saying, "Well, deliberately, I'm not going to look at that," taught me lessons about my interaction with myself, taught me lessons about the interaction with the workout itself that I can probably take back to coaching, but certainly as an athlete that I'll take forward. But also allowed me my not tinkering with that was very, very useful, because it's very tempting, isn't it, to say, well, it felt hard, so that means I am a shit athlete, or it felt hard, so that means I maybe set it too high and I need to adjust this. And actually, it felt hard because it was supposed to feel hard. I remember years back, this puts me in mind of an athlete I had, a lovely guy, Smudge, who was lifting weight, and he'd got to the point where he could lift whatever it was, his overhead press, and he could lift it for X amount of reps, and he was happy with that. He says, "This is good, it feels good." So I put more weight on the bar, and he said, "Well, how am I ever going to get better if you keep putting more bloody weight on the bar?" I remember being so confused at that as a statement, but also I understood what he was saying. He's like, I've just met that target, and now you've fucking moved the goalposts again."
So how am I going to get better if you force me to keep improving?
It's like, well, that is you getting better. And I think that was the same, that was the same moment, wasn't it? It's like, Alex, how am I ever going to become an athlete if everything feels horrible? Well, it's supposed to feel horrible, but look at what you just lifted.
Look at what you just lifted. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think we all do that in our own training, though, because the moment we feel like we're really struggling, we feel like we're really hitting a wall, it's so hard to look at things objectively. Because as much as we make excuses sometimes for poor performances, we also make excuses for good performances. And we say that good performance, what I thought a good performance was, if I go out for a run, and let's say I do a specific run, I do a specific trail, and I feel slower than last week, and I look at it, and the pace was maybe not quite the same as last week, but my heart rate was lower on it. I start thinking, well, my heart rate was probably lower because I just wasn't pushing enough. So maybe I'm burnt out, and maybe there's this, and you start catastrophizing all the reasons, rather than thinking, well, maybe I'm just actually having an easier time doing the work. Maybe I didn't push as hard for whatever reason. So the difference between giving yourself possibly the realistic interpretation, which may in fact be the more charitable one, which we often don't do in our own training, especially if we know we have an objective coming up, we know we have a big goal, we know we have something that we feel perhaps on some level, maybe I'm not prepared for this. There's this immediate thought to say, if I don't feel definitively on every single training session like I'm heading more in that direction, even if I am, there's this urge to change something. There's this urge to think that something might be wrong here in the process, because we've given ourselves no latitude. We think that we're here and we need to be here. So anything that's not directly in this direction is a step in the wrong direction. And sometimes it's very difficult to look at what we're doing and say, I am heading in the right direction. I may just not be necessarily looking at the right parameters right now.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell, is what parameters to look at, because there are so many sometimes. It's a difficult one, but it's been fun. It's been fun overall. I think what we'll do, Alex, is we didn't even cover off which way to do this before we come on air. Is I think if we cover off training, I want to talk about the strength training element as well in a minute, and then we'll kind of close off this podcast, and then we'll come back to another one with your permission, and put two back to back, I think, and talk about maybe nutrition and strategy for a separate podcast, so that we're not overwhelming people with information. But strength then. So again, the key goal, if you like, is this kind of ultramarathon, extreme ultramarathon distance, and through these kind of extreme environments. But one of the other key things that we wanted to do was maintain and add to overall strength. Some parameters we discussed, but really it was kind of a baseline. Let's just make sure we're most certainly not losing anything, and using the potential to gain overall strength in some given lifts. And given a few kind of injury profile things that I've got going on, I'm never going to be the greatest squatter in the world. And we know that one week I can press X amount and the next week I can press X amount divided by 4. so it's just that with those things in mind, you still put together a strength aspect, and a big component of the training in actual fact has been strength training. But if you'd like to, or if you can you talk us through what kind of what informed that for you? What kind of parameters are you looking at in that? I know what it looked like as the athlete, but I'd be interested to know why you put that together from your perspective.
Sure. So a lot of the strength work. I mean, first of all, it's one of the basic premises, of course, is not splitting out strength and hypertrophy work, and not splitting out, not periodizing the strength work into different phases. Basically, making sure that we are continuously, concurrently emphasizing every aspect of strength, whether it's rate of force production, coordination, balance, muscle hypertrophy, size, working accessories, is making sure that the program, since we had the luxury of it's basically a 14-week cycle that 14-day cycle that we've been doing.
Yeah.
So rather than getting caught up in the sort of myopic, okay, each week is the same thing over and over again, it's allowed us to kind of rotate a lot of these stressors over the course of 2 weeks, or in some cases, if we've had to push it out, over more than that. Mm-hmm. Now, so we can approach each element of strength, like pressing strength, for example, with a couple of different major lifts. And a lot of it, there's been a good combination. There's been a little bit of plyometric work, a little bit of focus on the explosive side of things. We've done a lot, and actually in a lot of the plyometric and agility work, a lot of that not only benefits the running, it benefits the strength work as well. Yeah. Doing things like being able to focus on balance, being able to focus on, again, the proprioception, where the weight is around your body. And I think by virtue of the fact that we have not been able to do as much strength training as obviously a dedicated strength training program would be, a lot of it is, again, finding what is that kind of minimal effective dose, and in terms of what's going to let you continue to stay strong in at least 2 different planes of motion in a press, what's going to give you still strong hip hinge strength, what's going to give you still strong ability to stand up under heavy load. And that's kind of been the 3 overarching, these are the themes associated with strength training.
Yeah.
So a lot of it has been, the same basic structure of beginning with 1 to 2 compound movements, and progressing from there. There's been a good amount of unilateral work. There's going to been a good amount, and especially on some of the plyometric days and other days, there's a lot of balance work and side-to-side shifting work, which benefits the strength training as well. Because being able to look at your stability on one leg is very much going to affect your stability on heavy Bulgarian split squats, which is going to affect your stability and strength on any kind of deadlift and squat movement, all of that kind of stuff. So I think the best way to describe the strength work has been it's more or less varied, and I think you've noticed that there's a lot to it, but it is absolutely concurrently on working on every component associated with strength development at once. And not being wed to specific movements, not being wed to specific bilateral, unilateral, really just thinking about it in terms of gross movement patterns and maintaining proficiency in movements, even if we are not necessarily building specific strength or force development in movements. Yeah. Like always giving you the possibility, the facility to lifting overhead, and always giving you the general stimulus of some sort of heavy hip hinge, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
sorry to cut you off there.
Go ahead.
The first part of that, which I think shouldn't but does blow people's minds, is the 14-day cycle, isn't it? Is that usually people are married to a Monday to Sunday. This is the way the microcycle works, and as you said at the top end of that description, that it would also follow a sort of a periodized approach. So we're going to do X for 4 weeks, and then we're going to take a deload, or however people kind of see that stuff panning out. And we know, I don't think probably our listeners need us to push the merits of concurrent training and understanding that if we're trying to manage all these things in one program, then periodizing it in that manner isn't actually going to work, and it's not necessary. But what has been interesting is that 14-day window. It's been quite, again, a fun way to do things, because the variety, as you say, not just from a physical perspective in terms of what we're looking at from an adaptive perspective, the variety as an athlete actually going in and saying, well, this day I'm doing such and such, uh, makes it really quite easy to attend to, because there's lots in there, as you've just described. There's lots to be doing. I understand why it's there as well, so I never have to have that kind of, well, why the fuck am I doing this question? That doesn't really pop up. So I mean, that maybe that's just where I am with the programming, but I've enjoyed that 14-day cycle. Um, what we've also done and been able to do, coming back to this kind of data management and all the rest of it, is I think we've been able to roll the punches a little bit, you and I as well, haven't we? In that
Oh yeah.
there have been issues with my shoulder, some issues. Also, I was ill for a bit. We had to kind of play back out of that. But certainly the kind of injury profile, like I keep harking back to, I sound like I'm making excuses to people, but I amn't. I'm just broken. all these different issues I've got, we've been able to find different ways of working the same thing, which has been fun, because if we say, okay, this particular movement here is causing this previous injury to kind of flare up because we've done X amount of work, and it's just this is now too much for that particular joint or whatever, that doesn't mean we then have to remove that, let's say, overhead element. It's just we have to find a way through a little bit of trial and testing and say, okay, why don't we try doing it this way, or why don't we try this particular movement? It might not work first time around, but a little bit of communication got us there. And so we're able to kind of present a program that then has all these elements that you're describing, without ever being something where we're married to the fact that it has to be written this way because that is the way that it has to come out.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's actually a really important point as well, is saying that if you can't do a specific movement because of discomfort, there's usually some way to do it. There's usually some way to get the same. I hate the term like foundational movement and everything else, but if you feel like a conventional barbell overhead press isn't working for you, there are a lot of ways to still continue improving your ability to support a weight overhead or over your eye line, which can still be an important thing to do. I mean, who knows? There's still a way to continue to train that doesn't necessarily involve a barbell overhead press. There is so many different loading progressions that you can do, so many different, unilateral variants and configurations you could get into with your lower body that still allow you, and being able to work through that and realize that the objective here is not just to get a better overhead press. The objective here is to continue building and maintaining your ability to generate force or support weight in a specific range of motion, and realizing that the lift itself is just the tool. It's just a means to an end. It is just a given lift is just the specific answer you have to the initial question. And sometimes if that answer no longer works, you think of a different answer. That's really it.
Yeah, I love that, actually. That's a really concise and succinct way to kind of describe that. In actual fact, it's the question and answer thing. That's you should patent that somehow. That works really well because it does make a lot of sense. Because as you say, we are not in the business, or certainly with this program and with this particular project, of making sure that one of the things is that Jonny Payne can press X overhead with a barbell, and it's not there, but it doesn't need to be. But in that same thought process, maintaining my ability, as you say, to kind of apply force in a structurally, we want to be able to not so much demonstrate strength as use that strength within sort of different circumstances. Means that pressing in that manner is useful, but it doesn't have to be with a barbell. It doesn't have to be in this particular movement. It could be any means. And so adjusting that should not have the effect where in this case, myself being the athlete, where you think, oh, fuck, but I was getting so close to a PB. It really hasn't really mattered in any shape or form. It's do you feel stronger is really, really difficult to quantify, isn't it? But there's no doubt I do. And although at the moment, I think I probably can now again, but for a while there, I couldn't press overhead. We were able to kind of play with some other lifts where it was clear that there was a decent amount of weight being shifted, and overall structurally, I'm coming out of it relatively strong. So yeah, it works.
Because I think that just ties on to one last thing, and I think something that's kind of been an overarching thought here is, I think there are a lot of people who do ambitious events or who want to do ambitious events that are dealing with a lifetime of injury and restricted motion. And there's that saying that as you get older, it's not that you get injured, you just acquire small, minor, permanent disabilities. And, I think a lot of that is self-fulfilling, because one of the things you do is you say, this movement is bothering me. I can't do this movement anymore. So they cut it out almost completely.
Yeah, yeah,
And what was previously just a restriction in a certain way of doing a movement suddenly becomes, I'm no longer doing this. I'm no longer pressing overhead. I am now making this self-fulfilling because it wasn't working prior the way I was choosing to do it. The answer I was choosing to use to this question, how do I get something overhead? My new answer is I just don't. Like, is that
yeah,
all I'm going to do at that point is guarantee that I have now completely restricted that
yeah,
entire
yeah,
arena to myself. And over time, yeah, it is. It's going to be self-fulfilling. If I stop doing this for 2 years, I'm not going to be able to do it. And I'm taking an existing restriction and making it worse. And I think that's why it's very much, as you deal with more injuries and as you deal with more restrictions, you find ways around them as much as possible, and you don't get so wed to conventional ways of training these systems and training these joints and training these movements, because after a while, if you do that, your list of things you can do is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's not what we want to be doing.
no,
Not when we're trying to improve durability and we're trying to maintain strength and we're trying to keep you as strong as humanly possible in the process. We don't want to reduce the list of movements and positions you can move your body in, because eventually you're going to get to the point where you may have, fantastic aerobic capacity, but you twist wrong getting out of bed and you throw something out, or you pick up your pack to put on your shoulder and suddenly you've done so little overhead stability movement that you pop something out.
yeah. The pack actually was the specific kind of thing I was thinking of there. If you got, I think my pack's about 11, 12 kilos. If you're throwing that on fast because you don't want to be standing around the Arctic and you don't have any overhead strength because you gave up because one particular movement hurt,
Yeah.
that fucking pack's going to hurt. No doubt whatsoever. But you're right, mate. You're right. It's kind of an interesting view to have of training, but one that I think both you and I agree wholeheartedly on is that you're not really just looking at what is going to make you stronger in X, Y, and Z. Lift, how do I get my deadlift up, or et cetera, et cetera. It's what's the outcome? What's the demand of the overall? What is it you're looking to do here? And then the rest is problem solving, isn't it? And as you say,
Yeah.
the question might be, how do I get stronger in this particular position? But the answer could be any number of ways. It's if you marry. We had a podcast just last week, Dr. Phil Price and I, where the question was, do hybrid athletes need to squat, bench, and dead? And the answer was ultimately no, unless they are powerlifters. And this kind of feeds into that same question, which is, do we need to do? Is actually the answer to that is nothing. Is no. Do we need to do X, Y, or Z? No, you don't. There's so many ways to skin a cat.
Whatever it is, no.
No, you don't need to do it at all. We can always find a way to manage that, unless you have a mechanical impediment that's never going to be overcome, like you don't have that leg or something.
Exactly.
In my case, I do, and the knee issue is the same for me. How do we work around that? Well, going right back to the very beginning of this show. We worked a lot of the plyometrics, the agility, that kind of powerful ballistic movements, etc., in order to ensure that particular issue was something we didn't have to kind of circumnavigate. We could work through that and actually kind of powerfully present ourselves with solutions. And so far, this is pre-event, so we're all full of piss and vinegar at the moment, but we might find a couple of weeks down the line, well, that didn't work and my leg's off now. But well, now I am feeling like we have covered all the bases with what has been an excellent program.
Yeah. Well, and I think, just to kind of wrap it up a bit, my general thought with a lot of these kind of events, and certainly with this one, was let's not have something avoidable take you out, because that's always what it is, isn't it? It's let's not have some movement detriment. Let's not have some some situation that should have been easily handled. Some small physical impediment or some small physical challenge. Anything that you could handle, let's remove or reduce the likelihood that anything is going to stop you from leveraging your existing physical capability. And that's what strength and conditioning programs should all be about anyway.
Agreed.
It's not just let's make you better at your sport. It's like let's put you in a position where the rigors of your sport are something you are physically more able to handle.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a big part of this program, and I think a big part of this philosophy. And it's actually a really interesting application of what we've been doing for, you and I have been doing on a coaching perspective for close to a decade now, with a lot of this concurrent training, especially dealing with people like, military and all these other all these other groups, is saying, okay, let's not only make you physically the best you can be, but let's also ensure that we are not leaving any fitness on the table that will better help you manage the challenges of your activity, of your day to day,
Yeah,
of whatever is going to get thrown at you out in the field.
absolutely. Batman.
Batman.
And on that very odd note, we'll wrap this one up, I think, mate. And we'll come back, like I said, and do another one if you're willing on maybe some more strategy. And people have asked a lot of questions about the calories and things, and you and I both have a reasonably good insight into that. I'd like to hear yours from that perspective. I'm sure other people would too. So we'll come back and do that one. But in the meantime, where can people find you, Alex, and how do people get a hold of you? I know the answer to that, but tell everybody else.
I was going to say the best way is honestly on Instagram, either at Complete Human Performance or at alex.viada. The spelling is going to be in the notes probably.
Yeah, we'll put that.
So those are the two best places. From there are all kinds of links to websites, all the information content we've got, where to find the Batman template.
Yeah. I would encourage people wholeheartedly to have a look at that, even if you just want to go in as a coach and have a read of that. And another part of what you do, we do, and you do exceptionally well, I think. I'm a member of your group. Is you have an education forum, don't you, Alex? Yep. What happens on there stays on there. No. Now, another resource that's worth shouting out is that there are some excellent things happen on there, and templates. Some of your templates, some of the things some of the projects that I know you've been enjoying as much as just quote unquote commercial products. These are kind of little labors of love of yours.
They really are.
Yeah, I can see that in the writing of them. Hence the Batman one. So people can, if they follow the dots and follow the breadcrumbs through alex.viada and or at Complete Human Performance, you can find those resources as well.
That would be it.
Right. Grateful to have you on, and hopefully see you next time. And
Absolutely.
that's that.
All right.
Thanks, Alex. Bye for now.